And I thought for starters, why don't we just sort of go down the line? We have here sort of, I think, actually a little bit of a who's who in terms of media, brands, agency, and research to sort of dive into AI. Merrill, do you want to start?
I currently run the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University, one of the largest media programs in the metropolitan area. We have 800 majors in our school at a university of 21,000 students. So big, exciting program. I also sit on boards, do strategy consulting for any number of big media companies, have been an angel investor for many years in addition to this, and actually have advised one of the companies that's very prominent in the category we're going to talk about today, Automated Insights. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Chung. I head up programmatic and media technology at Digitas LBI.
Hi, I'm Jenny Wise. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester Research, where we look at consumer behaviors and trends and how they're adopting technology and interacting with companies. And I specifically focus on how emerging devices and technologies are changing these customer interactions, including mobile, bots, and artificial intelligence.
And hello, my name is Michelle Castillo. I'm a reporter with CNBC, focusing on advertising and media. If the reason why I'm not answering your emails right now is because I'm here. But I've been fascinated by the intersection of digital media and how that's changing our advertising fields. Also a big Terminator fan, so.
So I think just for starters, and I'd love for this to be sort of an open discussion, and if people have questions, feel free to, sort of insert yourselves. But I'm curious, how many people in the audience currently use bots? Do people use Siri or Alexa? Or we were talking about this before. I think basically 47% of the US population is on Messenger, and there's a lot of bot action taking place on Messenger, for example. And Jenny just did a report a couple of weeks ago that talks about the rise of intelligent agents. And I think, do you want to sort of describe what intelligent agents are and how they're going to kind of make your life better, arguably, in the near term, longer term?
Yeah. So when we're thinking about intelligent agents, what we're talking about are the likes of Alexa, Google Now, Cortana, and Siri. And why they're their own class is because they are brands and companies that know a lot about your digital self, right? They're often plugged into your device. They know what's happening in your email. Are you taking a flight? What is your current location? And so they use this information to make your life hopefully easier. Right, they can help you manage tasks. You can dictate an email. They curate what they show based on your interests. So if I look at my Google Now cards, I'll see Red Sox information because I'm from Boston, where someone in New York would see the Yankees. So they help you sort of cut through all that digital clutter. And they also do this in a low-friction way because it has this conversational interface that you can speak to, which is also behavior that consumers are getting used to increasingly with the rise of bots and messaging apps, which are something that we'll talk to. So we expect to see consumers who are overwhelmed with digital touch points and want smarter interactions increasingly go towards those types of ecosystems to get what it is that they need in their mobile moments, whether it's content or utility or information. So we're keeping an eye on how these ecosystems are going to grow with consumer adoption, how it will change customer expectations from what they get from the digital world, and then also how they engage with brands. So will I still go directly to the brand's app, or will I expect to go to Google or Alexa, and they'll sort of mine that brand's data, curate it, and send it back to me?
So it sounds like the model, or where you and Forrester see things going, and I think obviously there are lots of data points that support that, the way that we'll interact with brands in the future is going to be very different and probably a bit less transactional and more of sort of a long-term relationship. Is that sort of an accurate assessment?
Yeah. Well, we'll expect to get more value from it, right? Which is what you expect from a long-term relationship. So I'll expect this brand to know more about my preferences, to serve up what it is that I need, and for me to have to put in less work, right? So I won't always have to re-identify myself and my interests. Rather, the brand will sort of shortcut me to the experience it knows that I want.
And with the current model, and this can be for anyone on the panel, is so right now, I think most of the early sort of iterations of this, it's sort of a hybrid of bot and human. For recommendations and things like that. Is there a point in time where it might go all bot, or you need that sort of human? Can bots show empathy, for example?
Yeah.
Or
So I'll answer that quickly and then hand it off.
You did a good job.
I know, but it's just Seemed to silence there. So I'll just say we're expecting there to be about 3 to 5 years until the intelligence behind these systems is enough that they can offload a lot of the human work. Today they just have a lot of computational power so that they can aggregate a lot of data and act on it more quickly, but you still need that human touch point in most circumstances. Yeah.
Carol, what are you seeing at Digitas? Actually, you have visibility across a lot of brands, and
Yeah, so kind of from the flip side, so we were just talking about from the consumer side. From a brand side, what we're looking at is how do we take the data that we have on our consumers and prospective consumers, how do we tailor our marketing and messaging in a way that is powerful and helpful and relevant? And so, for a very long time, we've been talking about one-to-one messaging, so being able to reach out and talk to a consumer as if, it was like a one-on-one conversation. And I think what's really exciting about AI and machine learning, and we call it programmatic media, is that now we have this whole onslaught of data available to our fingertips, and we're making connections between data, people, your behavior, your interests, such that we can start recognizing patterns. And so that's really going to help us figure out exactly what you're interested in. That way, advertising can become less of just like, here's a brand and here's what they want to say, but more like, hey, I think this is actually really helpful for you, and add value in that way.
I think that's also one of the biggest hurdles that AI will have to face. I think when the public or consumers think of artificial intelligence, they think of something like Skynet or like machines knowing too much or brands knowing too much. So when we have systems that can be more personalized or that show like a more human side to how AI can work and benefit your lives, I think that's when adoption will become more prevalent. Bots have been around for actually quite some time. How many people used AIM back in the day? Does everyone remember Smarter Child? So, it's not like a relatively, new thing, but as we get more examples of stuff like Alexa, it's going to become, I feel like that's going to help it become more mainstream and more accessible.
so I think bots historically have had sort of a negative connotation because bots theoretically inflate Twitter followings and social footprints and so forth. And I saw some data that I think came out over the past couple of days that during the last presidential debate, something like 30% of Donald Trump's pro-Trump tweets were actually bot generated. And I think, from a brand perspective, there's fear of fraud and so forth. But today, bots can be our friends, just like we have friends on Facebook. Isn't Facebook Messenger sort of emerging as a corridor for commerce and so forth? And bots are, our Sherpas that will take us on adventures and help us buy things and so forth.
Also, it's a negative and a big challenge for ad tech. We have a lot of ad tech experience in this room and on this panel, but the authenticity of inventory is very much in question and actually threatens stock prices for public and wannabe public companies. So there's a real negative and a real issue that a lot of people in the ad tech world are slogging through about the authenticity of audience, and this is a big problem.
Yeah, Merrill, also on the media side, so AP has been very aggressive in terms of moving towards artificial intelligence, and as I understand it, certain sports stories and I think some other types of content that they produce are actually now being generated by bots. And I guess the question is, for people in this room who are media producers or PR people, should people in this room be concerned that bots are going to take away their livelihoods? If bots can write press releases or bots can write stories, what does that mean for us?
To the extent journalism or PR time is spent writing press releases about corporate earnings, not a great use of the time of extraordinarily creative people, it's a plus. And lots of time and manpower in both public relations and media fields is spent doing that, writing stories about the Los Angeles Dodgers hit 3 home runs last night in a 6-0 victory. A bot or an AI application can do that just as well as a human being, and the human being ought to be in the locker room not worrying about writing that mundane but worthy story. Same thing goes with corporate earnings, same thing goes with real estate listings. There are a lot of categories where I'd like to believe this is going to free up resources in resource-constrained industries to do the real creative work and not the mundane work.
Another example of that is we all know that we have a limited amount of video inventory online that's premium, but there's such a high demand. So there are companies out there that will take trending topics and within a few minutes automatically turn a video that you can post on your website. A lot of video doesn't have replayability value because after the topic is over, nobody cares to watch it again. So this is a great way to get advertiser revenue on things that are really popping. But at the same time, if you do want that more in-depth story, as you were speaking to, Merrill, you still need something that has creativity and that can think on its own and be able to discern between the truth and the lie. And while bots can do that, we're not at the stage right now where they can do it at the same level of humans.
AP's move into this field is one of the more aggressive ones, which is why you noted it, Andy. But I think everybody's being a little slow here. There is still too much creative time across lots of fields, journalism and media being just one of them, that's wasted where application development and use of AI and bot technology could be shifting resources more aggressively. And as newspapers shut down and media companies recede, their efforts to do this are lame and slow, AP being an exception to that. And AP is a perfect model for this because AP wants to cover every single sporting event in the world going forward, and they have great expansion aspirations in that regard. And this is how they're going to do it, and that's public service as far as I'm concerned, and good business.
One question for you specifically, Merrill, because I wasn't able to join last week. You did a conference on local content and hyperlocal. And I'm going to guess that one of the primary issues that you dealt with is the economics of a local media property. Does this sort of technology offer up potential there for more and better local coverage by sort of taking away the mundane? And
Well, yes. Well, something that used to be called computer-assisted reporting and is now called data analytics can be done by even very small information gathering organizations at relatively low cost because of this same technology. Again, we're spinning all this rather positively, and these are the positive components of it. But yes, we have data journalism training courses actually at our place to help small entrepreneurial local companies who are under great stress for resource do interesting projects around data that's available from public sources, and that's a great resource and also really valuable public service material.
Carol, I think part of the promise of this is the personalized content. So brands, because there is this massive pool of data, brands have the ability to customize messages and to customize promotions and things like that. How far into that are we?
So who here has shopped for something online and has found that product following them thereafter? So yeah, it's happening. I think where we're at is, as you can tell, behaviorally, we are able to match, your previous activities and what you're doing and looking at, and then being able to find you again and, make sure that, you really buy this pair of shoes. We're also able to collect data from multiple sources and, create profiles. So maybe, this is the kind of person that would buy this shoe, and I'll go find more people like that who might be interested in that. The next frontier, if you will, is kind of creating what I think of as a memory. And so right now, as an advertiser, almost every conversation is still our first, right? So I might know something about you that would make me want to go and show you an ad. But when I do, and I show you that ad, that's it. It's like, here's my conversation with you. And then next time I see you, I'll say it again, right? And in many ways, that can get a little annoying, right? You're like, all right, I bought those pair of shoes, like, leave me alone. Or I'm not interested, thanks, I found them somewhere else. So what we're working on is developing like a real human memory, right? So now I can remember we had a conversation and you were engaged or you were not, or you watched my video and then you went to my site. So these are things that we're building, and all of that is predicated on the use of AI and machine learning, because that is a ton of data if you think about it, across millions of people.
Something that we were talking about in the green room before, so a report that Jenny penned uses a term intelligent agent. And you purposely, and Forrester purposely, didn't use virtual assistant or like that. So what is the role? Proactivity?
Yeah, so when we think about, is this working? I can't tell, but I think, okay. When we think about the role of this intelligent agent, we called it that because you'll probably hear a lot, they're bots, they're digital assistants, virtual assistants, but what that does is it implies that something is reactively trying to help you, right? But we call them an intelligent agent because they actually have the agency to act on your behalf, right? To make decisions, to learn as much that they can about you so that they understand your preferences and they can proactively serve recommendations or customize content to you. So that's why we called it that agent. And this is where we see that artificial intelligence really need to grow. Because when we look at bots today, or as you mentioned, sort of the algorithms that we're using to target ads today, it doesn't necessarily build. It's this Q&A format, or you have to follow this very linear path of question and answer to get to your goal. But if I shopped for that shoe, and then let's say I applied a filter to look at less expensive shoes, you could learn that I actually want something that looks like that shoe but is less expensive, so show me that instead. And so when we think about these intelligent agents, or let's think about Amazon, they know a lot about my shopping preferences. They could create this really robust profile of what I'm willing to spend, when I'm most likely to purchase, what size clothes do I buy, size shoes am I wearing, and know that I bought my last Nike sneakers a year ago, so it's time for some new Nike sneakers, so they'll show me the Nike sneakers in my favorite color teal in my size that's on a sale that day. Right? So that's when it becomes an agent for you. And that's when it becomes so valuable and helpful that you're willing to sort of use them as your broker and to mediate your relationship with brands and with information that you'll access.
I'd be interested in everybody's point of view on whether all this is in the interests of media companies and people who are having a very hard time making ends meet because of the depressed price of advertising. It seems to me that all this is about more inventory, more stuff, driving prices down further, and making it very hard for sellers of at least relatively conventional advertising to make money. What do you think about that at Digitas or Forrester? The glut of inventory, huge media problem. How is this going to play out in terms of advertising pricing at a moment in time when media companies' digital strategies are collapsing?
So I wouldn't continue to associate programmatic with, and it has been in the past traditionally, with very efficient pricing. So a lot of it, was built upon the idea of buying media inventory in an auction environment, much like, you'd buy something on eBay. We're actually bidding for prices of media impressions, and so it's been kind of this area where you go for media efficiency, and it's usually a performance or acquisition play by a brand advertiser to go and find people, irrespective of content or context, but for a good price. I actually think that programmatic is moving towards more premium inventory, and it's no longer about, hey, this is a really great way to reach people cheaply. It's actually more about application of data and less about the efficiency. So I would say our advertisers are starting to buy video through programmatic channels. We're starting to work directly with publishers and setting up these things called private marketplaces, PMPs, where we're actually securing the same kind of premium inventory that we would have done through a manual direct IO insertion order. But we're doing it in a way just so that we can use this technology platform underlying to help us with who is this, and can I give them the right message? And so it's really about adding inventory onto a platform now so we can be kind of as smart as possible.
And so there's a premium attached to that which will help solve the current media/advertising mess.
Sure. If I could solve that today, I probably wouldn't be here.
Well, isn't one of the issues that ads today display ads just aren't effective? I think the Google click-through rate is like 0.002%. So the idea being that if you can create more intelligent ads that really speak to your preferences, you'll be more likely to click on those. So that will kind of weed out the crap.
Is it even ads though, or is it? I think where we're heading is towards a sort of relationship marketing in a way, and
It's not necessarily media industry friendly because
Correct.
it implies a direct relationship between brands and consumers,
Right.
which is consumer friendly.
Right.
But in my life as a semi-media professional, I'm trying to figure out where the money is. I teach business models even at my university, and this is a big topic right now as students think about their own media careers because they see nothing but negative headlines about many of the digital revenue models, at least as currently implemented by media companies.
Had a quick 2 cents there, is that when we think about this direct relationship and this conversational relationship that we're going to have, there's still going to be a mediator at some point. And not every customer, right, is going to go to that brand's app to have a conversation with them every single time they want to search for something. That's sort of when we start to think about these intelligent agents or bots, you go where your consumer is. And consumers, right now, a lot of them are in messaging apps. Right? We have more than 1 billion using Facebook Messenger, WeChat's really popular, and they're going to that messaging app now to engage with other brands, right? So I can purchase flowers, I can set up a doctor's appointment, I can check my bank account, all through Facebook Messenger. So now as a company, I need to think about where is my customer and what are the new media opportunities. So how do I now engage with that customer in Facebook Messenger?
Right.
And I need to do so in a way that's going to be more native to the experience, right? So customers don't avoid it. And so that's going to be conversational, right? So it's still plugging into different ecosystems, right? It's just sort of this shift in what those ecosystems are and then what the resulting engagement will look like.
So basically, smart brands are sort of going where the people are, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Facebook Messenger, other, in-app or whatever.
Yeah.
Michelle, who do you think who's doing really good work here? And is creativity a factor, or is the value proposition this whole, sort of service? This bot can make my life easier. I don't know whether I care about inspired advertising. I think I used to. Is that even relevant today, or is it all sort of service based?
Well, one example that really stuck out to me when I started noticing AI advertising was a couple years ago at South by Southwest. There was a woman named Ava who was had a profile up there, and if you swiped on her, she would start a conversation with you. The first question was something like, "Have you ever been in love?" The second question was, "What makes you human?" And then the third question was like, "Where would you like to meet up?" It turned out Ava was a bot for Ex Machina, the movie, and if you passed her test, you would eventually be forwarded to her Instagram profile. One of my coworkers had been duped by Ava, which is how we found out about it. But so I found that a great way to, a great use of kind of becoming a person, like kind of acting human in order to draw someone into a product and even though you were duped, you were interested in learning more about this movie. Tinder's actually had a couple interesting other branded content initiatives. For example, I read something in Vice that a lot of the porn industry has been using Tinder. Some of these bots have been starting conversations about football teams, and then eventually you'll be asked to go to their webcam. So it's been a great, I feel like when you create that personal touch, that's like the best form of AI branded content. But from a traditional standpoint, and this kind of speaks to your point about where the jobs might be. In London in 2015, Saatchi created a reactive billboard. It had, I think, like 10,000 different pieces of creative. And as people would look at the billboard, the billboard would react in real time and collect data on what they were looking at and how long they were looking at it to create the ultimate advertising that people would actually be attracted to. So at the beginning of the day, a lot of the text was in lower caps and very colorful. But by midday, for some reason, it was all about hearts and limited colors and all caps. So bots, a human would never be able to come up with that many different types of creative in that short period of time within a few seconds. However, someone still has to create those initial 10,000 pieces. And from speaking to experts, that's where they think the jobs will still be. Bots might be able to create and manufacture an ideal conversation or an ideal poster, but they won't be able to come up with the original ideas on their own. And so that's why we'll still need those jobs. And I guess people just need to have higher technical skills. So while editors or agency leaders their jobs are definitely secure, the jobs will probably come from the lower tier entry level people. So it will actually raise the bar of like who will be working at these companies.
So in a way, bots are almost the new face of outsourcing in a way.
I guess you could say that it's like we're outsourcing our lower grunt work, like writing earnings or writing sports reports.
Something very formulaic.
But that will free up for more intelligent projects.
That's the hope.
Let me put a question out to the group here. There was something that was kind of all the rage, I think, last summer called Crystal Knows or Crystal. I'm going to turn towards Sean, who's a colleague here. Crystal Knows or Crystal Says, where you can ingest some copy. It could be an email. It could be, I think, any form of writing. And Crystal will tell me how to communicate with Merrill. Merrill likes to the point, no more than 3 sentences. Don't don't use emoticons or things like that, the way that I would interact with Carol would be different. So it's sort of a personality kind of scanning operation. Do you think that, how far can bots go? Will they be able to create? Could a bot write a press release? Could a bot write Moby Dick in time?
So I covered Watson for quite a bit, and I think one of the biggest issues that was facing Watson at the time was the fact that it, at the beginning, it couldn't tell the difference between sarcasm and a lie, and that was a big problem for the medical industry because House says everyone lies.
Yep.
And so, but we actually are at the point where bots can, if they have facial recognition, can tell if someone's lying or is sarcastic. Through text, however, we're not at that point yet. It really can't determine if Merrill was being sarcastic or you were making a joke and you didn't really mean to write that if that wasn't
context.
So
is still,
we're not there yet. So I don't know how advanced. I don't think we have to worry about that. You still need human interaction. That being said, I think Bill Gates said that we overestimate how fast our technology will move within the next 2 years, but we underestimate how fast it will move in the next 10. So we could get to that point, but we're not there yet.
But there's a long way to sarcasm from where we are now, where most everything quantitative certainly can be checked. So PolitiFact and other checkers are using related technologies to do things like when Donald Trump says he's won every single piece of survey research in recent weeks, that's quantitative, and there's a response to that says X polls and Y polls. So there are a lot of things where this technology can be used, sarcasm being on one extreme, but all things quantitative can now be at media companies or at agencies, I think, measured effectively if people embrace the technology.
Do bots have the potential to give consumers sort of a warm and fuzzy feeling that they're being taken care of? It's like, is this sort of a democratization of service? It's like...
Don't you say thank you, Siri?
No, I don't, but
people do.
Do they?
Yes, I've seen them do on trains and cars and other places.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Siri. Thank you, Alexa.
Yeah. So, it's like historically, you could have a personal shopper at Barney's, but if you're at Marshall's or something like that, you probably don't have a personal shopper who's going to say, oh, I held this sweater for you because I know you like this color and texture. And then also even the White House, I think in August or so, launched a messenger program. And, obviously not every post through Messenger makes its way to the president, but it appears that there's a mechanism and a protocol so that people feel like their voices are being heard, even if it's by a bot.
I'll just chime in there. I think this gets into bots having personality, or bots as the brand, right? And so that White House, for example, is essentially, it's a new inbox that you can send your message to, and then after you send it, it will say, okay, do you want to spell check this? Give me your name and information so that we know you're not some random person and you can't say something terrible that we can't track.
Right.
And that's that. Like, it won't actually respond to you. So in some ways, it's just a new channel to message. And a lot of the early bot integrations that we're seeing don't have a lot of personality and don't necessarily make you feel warm and fuzzy when you talk to them, any more so than when you talk to the automated person on the phone.
Right.
For example, 1-800-Flowers, it's linear. I set my order, let's say I want to change the day when I get to the bottom, it will not understand me. I can say, go back, change the date, and it doesn't understand what I'm doing, and then I get frustrated and I want to leave. But we do see, for example, Sephora has a bot on Keek where it does talk and it uses emojis and it has sort of a young personality, but it will get to the point where it has to understand that maybe the younger consumer wants those emojis, but I don't, and tailor it to your point.
Right.
And so it's not there yet. They're still trialing being human, but they're not quite there yet.
So I think, does anyone in the room remember Tay, which was Microsoft's AI, Microsoft Siri kind of product that they launched in the spring of this year, if I recall correctly? And I think what happened with Tay was basically it was corrupted. It was like our human societal faults and so forth somehow corrupted this bot so that he or she or whatever the bot is was spewing sort of neo-Nazi rants and so forth. And it was such a disaster that actually Microsoft just totally pulled the plug on it. Can bots be better than us? Can they be better than our sort of...
I think bots are only going to be as good as the human programmer that built it. right? And so that's really what this comes down to. Like, are they a positive influence? Are they a negative influence? They're both. It depends on who built the program and what they intended the program to do. It could be helpful. It could be creepy, right? And creepy oftentimes is how accurately helpful they are, or are they just stalking you across the web? Or they could be bots that are faking impressions and really screwing with our economy because they're trying to imitate human views and video views and impressions and clicks, and it's all, we have a whole fraud issue. And in fact, fraud on the internet is almost as large as an organized crime as the drug trade now, because it is fairly easy to perpetrate and there's a lot of money in there. So it's really we can talk about bots, but behind every bot is still a human.
Okay.
I hope our conversation doesn't suggest that this is something out there and not current and not immediate, because I think we should have a sense of urgency, this community and other media-related communities, that this is really important. And if you are slow to this, you're missing both content creation opportunities and client opportunities. One survey I read in the last few days thinking about this panel said that 2/3 of all enterprises in the country are going to be involved in AI capability sometime between now and 2018. So that's a lot of money at stake and a lot of business opportunities for everyone in this room. So get current on it. Yeah. There was someone pleading with us over here.
Please.
So in regards to AI, you're saying that bots may in the future write press releases and do kind of these things that all these PR professionals do on a daily basis. So if you're running like a smaller agency who you don't have the funds or the accessibility to these big machines and learning, what other ways are these? Can you use AI to do PR, I guess, in a better way and create these relationships with the media, not only consumers, like more like the B2B people, like B2B clients, or just media in general? Like, how does it affect or not affect those?
Sure. I'll take that since I have a somewhat modest agency. But so I think the short answer is I don't know if there are any off-the-shelf products or platforms that we can use, like in the same way that we use Vocus, a database. Or
There's one called Wordsmith.
Oh, is that so?
One example, produced by Automated Insights out of North Carolina.
There you go.
So take a look at Wordsmith and what it can do. Now, I didn't mean to interrupt, but much of what they do is about automating the kinds of things we've talked about, and it's probably unlikely that most small agencies are doing lots of earnings press releases for Fortune 100 companies. On the other hand, there are ways to do data analysis for your clients that this kind of software could be helpful with. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no. I think, in my estimation, I think it's early on that sort of life cycle, but I'm gonna guess that just in the same way that Salesforce became a thing, or social media, I think we're at the outset of something that might be analogous to where social media was, say, 7 years ago or something like that, where companies and brands are just sort of wrestling. What is this? How do we navigate this sea? But I'm very confident that if there's a single platform, and I think some of the stats about adoption by 2018, obviously there are going to be more that come up, and it only makes sense. And as a small business owner, if you can reduce the production costs of content, that's a good thing.
I mean, think of how often your tweets on behalf of your clients are relatively simple. I mean, it is a link and a few words summarizing it. Yep. There's very little that has point of view or editorial about it. You're doing basic communication in limited characters. Could be an automated function, and is at some places already, I gather.
Yeah.
Also, there's similar to Wordsmith, there's a bot called Articulo, and what they do is you put in, I think 3 or 4 keywords. It's a company out of Israel, and they produce up to 500-word articles just based on those keywords, which is insane. It's mostly done for SEO purposes.
Yeah.
But
no, it's still significant. I think Merrill and I looked at a company, I think last summer or so, very big in Europe, that does a lot of brand content. So eBay, for example, can sort of customize across different languages and so forth. But brand content, I think, is going to be a big, spot for this.
So my question is about, I know we talked a lot about how brands can use AI to connect with their consumers and offer relevant things to their consumer based on what they think the consumer likes. But what about how do you see AI adopting sponsored content? I think there was a statistic that came out maybe from eMarketer a few days ago that said 30% of search, maybe even Forrester actually, 30% of search is going to be through Echo and Siri, or through the text search is going to be phased out. Like 30% is going to be, I don't know, in 2018, a relatively not too far away future. So how is that going to form on, I'm going to ask Alexa, what restaurant should I go to, and how is she going to say, is there going to be a thing where she says, well, based on where you'd like to eat, I think you should go here, but, this restaurant is giving away free drinks today or something. I don't know. Just what do you guys think?
Do you want to?
So that will happen. And essentially what it is, so when we think about how to engage with these ecosystems, you have two options. Either as a company or a brand, you need to focus on changing your own owned experience, right? So that it's more personalized and customized and conversational. Or you essentially have to piggyback on these larger ecosystems that are doing that. So just like you do SEO now for Google, in Google Now, you're just going to figure out, okay, how is it mining the web and taking into account these customer preferences? And so how can I make sure that I remain present when it does, right? So make sure you've opened up your owned assets into their ecosystem to crawl. That's sort of how it will exist in these ecosystems. So it's the same strategy. You'll just have to be aware that they will be changing their algorithms, that they'll be working on natural language processing and voice instead, so you may have to change your keywords. And the benefit is what they serve to the customer should hopefully be much more relevant, because you're also piggybacking on their algorithm for relevancy, right? So it can sort of be a win in that way.
I would say more immediately probably what will happen, it's going to take some time to insert actual voice ad of recommendation right in there. But I think that if we could connect, let's say, that Alexa installation with your desktop or your mobile phone, then we could probably go find you on another device. And say you're asking for airline fare to, California, then maybe when I see you again somewhere else, I could say, hey, by the way, here's a good ticket price. So.
Any closing thoughts, Michelle?
Don't fear the bots.
Don't fear the bots.
They're here to help you.
I think the promise, from a PR standpoint, and I think from an advertiser standpoint and a media standpoint, if I can communicate to you in a way that particularly resonates with you, then I feel like I've done my job. And I think bots can help in that regard. I think the idea of public relations is you want to engender trust, and you want to relate to people on their own terms. And so if you can do, there's sort of a marketing buzzword, I think it's called segment of one marketing, where I can market not just to a person like you, but I can market specifically to you. And I think that's, I hate the, it's a cliched expression, the Holy Grail, but that is sort of the Holy Grail.
Just as we wrap up, it's been great to hear the benefits of AI, but also the risks. Because if you think about anyone who's in content creation, who's starting to adapt it and grow, you think about fact checking and the need for human interaction in addition to technology. As a closing thought, maybe.
I do have to admit though that if I get a pitch from a PR professional that seems like it was a generic email,
spray and pray.
Yeah, or it was. I do get some automated ones now that plug in your name. It kind of turns me off. I probably won't read through the whole thing.
Right.
So I still think there is a lot of value with human interaction. I mean, I do appreciate using bots, especially if I'm trying to plan a trip in a foreign country, where there might be a language barrier. I don't mind using but at the end of the day, I still have to get someone on the phone to get my specific request, because there's just a lot of things, there's still nuances and concerns that people just don't get. I mean, that bots don't get, and I don't know if they will ever get to that point where they will have that human touch.
Yeah, and I agree. I would think, to Merrill's point, it really depends on the context and what the need is. But I think human oversight from both a QA purpose and also adding that little piece of color that gives it a little something is still critical.
My closing thought is, looking ahead a little bit, that the point that was made earlier about the magnitude of bots involved in the political campaign, and that's a lot of attention is focused on that. I think you can say that the next president, who's certain to be a New Yorker, is going to face regulatory issues around all this, and the latitude that companies have in this regard might be somewhat constrained as a result of that regulatory process. But I think there also needs to be people like us who are talking about the upside of all this, so the downside doesn't dominate the public discussion.
Right. Taking the time to learn a little bit about AI and bots. And thank you.